Hi, in this video I want to I want to go on about a subject about how just because you have a good deal doesn't mean that you're the winner. Well, of course, you may be the winner in your particular circumstance, but I want to discuss how if you get a good deal, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've come out winning. Even in not only just in your circumstance, you may have not just lost in your circumstance outright. You can have just you created a negative in many cases, depending on the future implications of the decision and the good deal that you think you've made based on your cheating of the system in many ways, getting away with theft in many circumstances, because nothing's free. Because if you get away with it for free, or and you get a good deal on something, that means someone else is going to be not getting what they need. You take the good deal, it means that the people aren't going to be getting their money that they need in many cases. If you get a good deal, unless it means that they're going to have a surplus, you're just sort of ripping them off. They're trying to get rid of it, and they have no other choice but to, decrease the prices. Oh, it's better less money than no money, so we might as well take the less money. But generally, in many cases, I guess I'm talking about sales here, but whatever it is, you take something away from someone, you win. Yes, you get in your circumstance, but you've stolen something, which is generally speaking not something you want done to yourself. Therefore, you wouldn't do it to someone else, but you're breaking that rule, the golden rule. So, yes, if you're breaking the golden rule and you wouldn't want it done to yourself, which is almost impossible to avoid, because it's seemingly almost impossible not to at least contradict yourself once or twice. But yeah, if you're breaking the golden rule, then you're breaking a fundamental aspect of what makes this game, or at least what makes the attempts at trying to make this game fair, mean anything. So if you're not at least obeying, those rules, you're not even trying to win. You're not even trying to make an effort to make this game as fair as it can be. So if you're not doing that, then you're making the game kind of a cheater's paradise, and that's no way to have a living, a place for sentient beings that feel, generally speaking, in the negative all the time. It doesn't seem like a reasonable place to play an unfair game. It seems like the worst place and the worst way to play a game is to play it unfairly like that. But yeah, if you get away scot-free. You get what you want. You don't suffer any consequences for getting the deal you want. There obviously has to be a catch-22 somewhere, right? But if you're getting away with it, and the catch-22, yes, that I've mentioned is that, yes, there's, generally speaking, if someone takes away something for a lower price than what seems reasonable, or what seems, if you do something or get away with something that seems unfair, then in many cases the end outcome could be good or bad. I guess that comes down to the implication versus the implication of intention. If intention matters more than anything. But intention matters in certain circumstances, and it doesn't matter in others. Intention matters if there is an outcome. Yeah, intention matters if there is an outcome. Um, well, before I go into that subject, before I confuse myself too much, um, the main point I'm trying to make, and without losing myself, is that in the net, like what's been mentioned before, it's about the net gain of the whole game. The individual pieces don't matter, but then again, the individual pieces is what makes up the whole of the game. And if the individual pieces can be discarded or look to as sacrifices, then the whole piece doesn't mean much of anything. It's just the survival of one big hive mind for the one big hive mind. So all the little ants, little servants of the hive mind, little citizens of Hive Mindville, have to be victims of sacrifice for whatever reason, however it is. Sacrifice, generally speaking, is negative, and they're going to be victims just to keep the hive mind existing for no good reason. So I guess that's something you could look at if you view society as a whole as more meaningful than your existence, just for the sake of existing, just to know that at least the idea in the back of your head that something's existing, I guess, means something. But I don't think that has much meaning. If we can't look at each individual as if they mean something. Um, Obviously they do, but that's the nature of this existence, is that you can't ignore either one, because either one has its catch-22. If you ignore the whole, then each individual piece means very little, and if you ignore the the little pieces, then the whole doesn't mean much. Um, so if you tear down the foundation of the whole, then the whole doesn't mean anything because the things that make up the whole don't mean much of anything. But obviously speaking, there's the right and wrong circumstances for which to make a sacrifice. And not like I've mentioned before, you can only know the implications so much. So the sacrifice is not always too, is not too often in vain, or too often frivolous or seemingly hopeless, because we would only make those sacrifices if we knew to a certain extent that it'd be worth it, or knowing that there's no other way out, and that's the dead end that we have to reach. That's the only way reasonable under expectation that we can ever have in doing something like that. So yeah, because sometimes you get a good deal, does not mean it's a positive because you get something uh, underpriced. Doesn't mean you win. Sometimes someone else loses and it matters. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes. So yeah, it's all about the net gain in the end. Um, I can't remember the point I was trying to make earlier. But oh well, I guess. So yes, it's about the net gain as a whole, and that's what matters. It's the thing that objectively matters is the net gain as a whole, as opposed to the small pieces. But like I've said, if the small pieces can be disregarded as, little sacrifices, little foot mats or little carpets to wipe your feet off on, then I see no, just so that the carpet inside stays clean. What's the point in having I guess that wasn't a good analogy, but what's the point on these little pieces working together? If since they're the things that make up the whole, what's the point in all having all these pieces if they're just so easily disregarded? Um, doesn't seem like it makes much sense. But like I mentioned before, it depends on the circumstance. And obviously it's not happening left and right, but obviously all the time we have to make our decisions. And our decisions come with a risk and a sacrifice in every single circumstance in which we're making a decision. So that's something that we're constantly dealing with. And since we're so often in those circumstances, we've become blind to those circumstances. But just because we're blind doesn't mean it's not existing. Sort of like it still exists, life still exists. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing. You're so used to the shit that you don't realize just how shitty it is, and it's the norm now. You don't realize just how bad it is. Just because it exists doesn't mean it's a good thing. You're just so used to it because that's the only thing you have that you haven't realized just how crappy it is until it's gotten really good. And the really good you're experiencing is just avoiding the negative. You're getting up closer to the zero. And the zero, and the only way you can reach a zero is death. Because that's the zero-sum game. Because once you reach death, you're no longer in the game. And the zero-sum is the final goal that you're reaching, and that comes with death. You start at that point, and you end at that point. So that's how the game goes and rolls, I guess. Unfortunately. So, I think that's all I need to mention. Just give me a second to think. Let me think. I know I missed something earlier in the video. I was going off on intention. I was going off on intention. And I was talking about the net goal and intention, how intention matters. And that's how you make on many of these value judgments is based off of intention and seeing if it means anything. So intention versus no intention. Where was I going with that? I'm so confused right now. My thoughts aren't straight. But yeah, intention matters in certain circumstances, and intention matters doesn't matter in other circumstances. Once something's happened, your intention doesn't matter. If it ended up negative and your intention was good, the intention doesn't matter. The fact is that it still happened. I mean, we're not going to necessarily punish you for that, but it's going to be an implication of what is happening in the future, and based on what happened in the past led up to that future. But just because your intention was different doesn't mean that you're not going to say suffer consequences. In many cases, that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, I don't like saying that. It needs to be changed. It needs to be changed, but we're in a game where it can't be changed. The fundamental aspects of it can't be changed unless you eliminate the product of sentience out of the game for which created the sentience to begin with. And that's the only way you can get rid of it, and that's unfortunately. So, yeah, intention matters in certain circumstances, and it doesn't matter in other circumstances. And just because you end up getting away and winning, it doesn't matter that you got away and won. It's about the net. But like I said, the insidiousness of this game, quote and out quote, is the fact that if you are willing to sacrifice the little ones for the whole, it doesn't mean much of anything for the whole either. So it just negates itself either way. And if the little things matter but the whole doesn't matter, you might as well just say, let's have all the rich people, let it be as unfair as possible. Let all the rich people keep their money, keep their legacy as long as they want, and say, screw all the little peons out there that need something, and just let it be up to them if they want to. But then again, just teach them it's all about you. Who cares? Don't let them feel happy. But it's about equalizing this game and getting as much out of as little as possible. And that's, I guess, the idea. The idea to go somewhere down the middle where you can at least understand, rely on human generosity, right? Or at least reason. Not to be blind to the fact that there's not necessarily always black and white, there's gray, unless it comes to the facts, where that is black and white. But when it comes to traversing those facts with a philosophy and understanding, there's always ways to weave around and find the right path before you confuse yourself into oblivion, because in many cases that's what happens. So just because you get away with something doesn't mean it's a net product. It's about the net product as a whole, and just because you got away, but if that causes something negative to happen on some other side, like I've mentioned, your individual effect really doesn't mean anything because you're just part of the initial effect that caused you to begin with. So you're just a piece moving the game. As all these pieces are affecting each other, your effect isn't really an effect. You're just sentience experiencing the effect. And the effect only means something is because it's affecting other sentience. Because cause and effect, interaction doesn't mean anything without sentience or experiences. Or the game that we're playing of cat and mouse and maze traversing, it only means something because there's sentience. And without that sentience, it doesn't mean anything. This cause and effect, this interaction. And since everything's interacting with everything, your interaction, you're not really the thing having the effect. You're just a piece in the whole interaction based on an initial cause leading to an end effect. So really, like I mentioned before, the jumping off and then the landing. Whatever happens in between, it doesn't matter. You're going to land. It doesn't matter where you land. It just matters that you're landing. The landing, it's like this experiencing the pain as opposed to not experiencing the pain. You're landing, you're jumping, you're landing, you're experiencing pain more or less, or you're not experiencing more or less pain. And so that's, in a way, you can look at it as those black and whites that I've mentioned, and those are the absolute facts of existence. Just because I can't explain everything that's happening inside those facts doesn't mean it's not existing as those facts portray in reality. I don't need to understand for the facts of reality to exist and move about in the way that they're moving about, because they're moving about in the very words that I'm speaking, in the very words that you're speaking in denial of. It doesn't mean anything if you're in denial, because it's denial, and I think we all know the truth. And even if you didn't know, it doesn't matter, because not knowing is just ignorance based on what is true, and you're just living in a fantasy world where you're living based on what's not true. So it doesn't mean anything. And like I mentioned before, with the intent, if you were intentional, it's about the net gain. So all these things are things to consider when it comes to making these value judgments. It's like I mentioned before, the whole doesn't mean much without the little things, and the little things don't mean much without the whole. So if you're willing to sacrifice the little things to make the whole, like I mentioned, it's about looking at it for the whole, the individuals mattering, but realizing that the whole matters, and recognizing that as a philosophical fact, and using that fact to make the decisions, use those facts of reality to make the decisions, or smart decisions, where we can make it a more fair game, even though we necessarily can't make it an equally fair game, because obviously there's only so much we can do to make it a fair game, unless we're all working in lockstep. But I'm just saying that we are trying our best and looking down the middle and realizing there's only so much you can do, but you can still have an effect if you want to continue the game, or at least make sure there's an end, or at least an easy end for which we can reach, and to make it as easy as possible in the meantime. That's all we can do, and that's what we're in the process of doing, at least hopefully. So yes, intention. The whole doesn't mean much without the little things, and the little things don't mean much without the whole. But we're willing to sacrifice the little things for the whole. Even the whole doesn't mean much without the little things. In many cases, we're practicing the exact opposite, where the rich people isn't a good example, because that's the way I look at it, or is the individuals matter more in those circumstances, where we're letting all the rich people keep their money and legacy, and they're the ones profiting off the game and letting all the peons out there suffer and be the ones that the victims of their international horrible um, crimes, international crimes and extortions, I guess, using us and using it against us to keep us as slave labor in many cases. Unfortunately, to at least simplify the idea, that's what we're doing. We're slaves to these things. But we're slaves to life, and that's what life allows. And the fact that life allows that at all makes it not really worth anything. So yeah, sorry if this was a little buggy, incoherent, but I'm trying my best. So many ideas at once. So sorry if it was a little incoherent and a little fast again. Sorry, talking a little too fast again. A voice, oh, serious. It dries my voice out so easily when I'm talking so much. You know, I can't even cut myself a break. So yeah. Anyway, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did I forget anything? Intention, yeah. Intention really doesn't matter in the end as a whole, but it can matter and say if you want to figure out if a person should be punished logically, if you're going based off of logic, it can matter in that circumstance. But I've mentioned intention before in one of my previous videos, so I guess you can go back and try and find that one, where intention does matter in circumstances, but it only matters, generally speaking, intention doesn't matter, because it's a matter of just things happening and not happening, but it matters in logically understanding if an intention had an effect, because you don't want to cause more pain to a person that necessarily didn't intend something to happen negatively. So it does mean something in the end as a whole, but it means something in certain circumstances and not in others. But generally speaking, it doesn't mean anything, because intention doesn't change the fact that something happened. But intention was part of the intent, either. But you know, the existence of an intention or the lack thereof an intention did have an involvement, because it was part of the process for which led to the consequence and outcome. And like I mentioned before, the whole stuff and interaction and cause and effect don't mean much in the end, because we're all just pieces moving based on an initial instigation that happened to begin with. So my effect is just I'm a sentient being, and cause and effect doesn't mean anything unless I'm a sentient being or I'm affecting another sentient being. But I have to exist to have that effect, or therefore have the effect on me. So the effect doesn't mean much. Interaction doesn't exist really or have any meaning without the sentience. And that's where the interaction and the lack thereof of our effect really has its, because we're not the ones, we are an effect. We're a part of the stream of existence moving forward. And just because we exist and we're sentient doesn't mean that our moves really have any effect, but we're still the pieces, and since we're still inside the game, doesn't mean that we're not going to get away with our crimes. We're not, doesn't mean we're going to get away with our crimes. It means that we're going to still suffer the consequences, because we're still working within the function of this game. We're inside the game. Therefore, if I commit a crime, I'm going to suffer the consequences. Whatever happens, even if I don't say get prosecuted, I'm still going to suffer whatever consequences of that action are. Good, positive, negative, whatever it is, whatever way you want to see it. So they exist either way. So before this video goes on too long, I think I've made my points. I don't want to keep going over redundant latest to make sure I get exactly the way I want it, but I did think I got the point good enough, for which I think any reasonable person, I can at least reasonably expect to understand me, right? So I hope I can at least have that expectation. I think I narrowed it down just enough for at least the lowest common denominator to at least understand what I'm saying. So yes, anyway. If I have anything else to say on the subject or subjects that I mentioned, sorry it's a long video, I said 10 minutes. Screw me, right? Anyway, yes, if I have anything else to say, I'll mention it next time. So thank you, and until next time, bye. Bye.